Arriving on my first day in 7th grade, I realized very quickly the other girls didn't have their clothes handmade. Between my dad and my stepdad, the two of them combined couldn't provide for our family financially. So my mom did what the majority of women will do. She handled it. And she handled it by working a job she absolutely despised in order to still make sure we had clothes. And what I've realized in owning a financial planning firm that focuses specifically on retirement planning over these last 18 years is I never want women to feel like I felt as a child financially. Women hold more wealth in the country now than men do. They have been statistically proven to be better investors. But also the truth remains that longevity is now the biggest risk that they face because 80% of men die married and 80% of women die single. And so she has got to have a better idea of what's going on with her finances because I know that there are thousands and millions of women who are just like my mom who will give and give and give to the people that they love and cherish and will often sacrifice themselves because of it. And so I want to be able to shine light and say, yeah, you can still do this, and this is still great, and you want to give to your grandkids, and you want to do this kind of stuff, but we need to make sure that you're handled first. And so really that's our overall goal, is to be able to communicate in a way that gives the information that they need, and to be able to partner with somebody who understands really the unique characteristics that face women, and really just to be able to answer that overarching question, am I gonna be okay? And that is really what I am so passionate about. That really is my mother. It's not a stand-in actress. But it was actually that interview from a number of years ago when the interviewer asked me about my mom. And it was the first time I'd ever used the term, she handled it. Because my mom started as a lunch lady from less than zero at 45 financially to have enough to retire by the time she was in her late 60s. And it was a lot of sacrifice on her part. But she was extremely fortunate that her daughter became a financial advisor. And there are thousands of women out there who don't have that luxury. That's why I'm here. My mom is amazing. I mean, she's an incredible seamstress. She made every homecoming dress I ever wore. She made my junior prom dress, and she made my wedding dress. Wow. She did that with 3 big dogs living in the household. I think that's pretty impressive. But she also take yourself back to the 80s when we couldn't afford Pound Puppies and Cabbage Patch Kids. She made me this. So Scruffy was my most favorite pet in the whole world. And when he died, these are Scruffy's original tags. She made me my own Scruffy. So yes, my mom is incredible at sewing. But you know what's funny is sewing isn't hereditary. I don't have that skill. So yes, my mom is amazing. But let's get honest for a moment. Take yourself back to middle school, junior high. The last thing I wanted was to have my clothes handmade or to have to go shop at Goodwill. I wanted to be like the other girls. I wanted to go to Bell Square and I wanted a shirt that said Guess in really large letters across the front just to prove to everybody that I had bought it, right? And so by the time I got into high school, I determined how I was going to solve this financial predicament that I was in. Seemed like a pretty simple idea. Meet a nice boy, have him solve it for me. I told that to 250 junior high girls in Tacoma. They knew that was a bad idea. But that's the plan I went with. Dated a young man throughout high school, went to Juanita High School. He was playing baseball at the University of Washington. I had full ride scholarships to play volleyball at University of South Florida and Colorado State. So I boldly and proudly declared to my mom and my coaches, I am going to the University of Washington, which meant I gave up my scholarships for a boy. Very disappointed in that choice. But 4 years later, I was first of my friends to get married, the first to buy a home. I finally got to travel, which I never got to do growing up. And so I was like, I got to go to Hawaii and Mexico. And I was like, oh, I finally arrived. And in early 2000, I was the first of my friends to get divorced. I was 24 and divorced. And I had to get what everybody called a real job. And the reason being is because I have a Bachelor of Science in zoology. Totally makes sense. I own a financial planning firm, but that is the reason why in that picture my mom is holding a red-tailed hawk. I used to run Sarvey Wildlife Care Center, second largest wildlife rehabilitation center in the state. It's up in Arlington. I loved this job. I have worked with every wild animal known to man. I have raised harbor seals and otters and skunks and hummingbirds and bobcats, and I've done blood transfusions between eagles, and they've been attacked by a cougar. So that story, yeah, you'll get that in my book that you'll go home with tonight. So I loved this job, but my $400 a month stipend wasn't enough to pay my bills. So I had to get this real job everybody talked about. And my girlfriend happened to be sitting in the coffee shop at the first floor of this building. It's a different coffee shop now. I think it was at Tully's at the time. And she was getting up. Somebody needed her table. They exchanged business cards. He was new to the building. And he said, by the way, do you know of anybody who's looking for a job? I just opened a company. So I ended up going on that job interview, accepted the position. It ended up actually being the only job interview that I went on. And the gentleman that hired me became my business mentor, my business partner, and 17 years ago, more than 17 years ago, my husband and the father of our 3 boys, Randy, the other owner of Becker Retirement Group. And actually, there is a young man who is not in the room right now, but he probably sat most of you, that looks awful lot like his dad. And that's our oldest son, Morgan. So he works for us now as well. So very, very fun. But what I have realized in the last 22 years of running a retirement planning firm is there is a significant, I would even say massive need across the nation and in our community here for women to receive financial education in the manner in which women best learn. That is what I do. I want to make sure that women are getting the education that they need and deserve, but that it's going through a filter that resonates with you. Because the truth is, 80% of my industry is male. That doesn't make it bad. It just is what it is. And so a lot of times the information that's disseminated just doesn't resonate with a lot of women. And I was one of those women. And that's why I took the time to write my book. As I said, you all get that tonight. That was a passion project. It was a labor of love because I was not that interested in reading a lot of the financial books that were out there. And so I wanted to write a book that was based all in story. So all of the financial concepts come through that way. So you'll all get a copy of that tonight. But we are not a women-only company. Most of our advisors, including this great gentleman back there, Pavel, he's one of our advisors. Most of our advisors are men. We have female advisors, but most of them are male, and half of our team is, right? But our company has seen a huge need, and we want to make sure that women are getting what they need from us in the way in which you best learn and understand. So that's why I'm here. That's why I crafted this seminar, and that's what we're going to have fun doing tonight. All right, yes, the compliance slide. Not that you can read it anyways. What is it telling you? If you need legal advice, speak to an attorney. We have a great estate and tax attorney that we partner with. If you need tax advice, seek a CPA. We have a full-time CPA on staff. She's amazing. And if you need financial advice, talk to a financial advisor. There's a couple of them in the room. I think that's why we're here tonight. Okay,
So what are we going to be doing? Well, tonight we're going to be talking about how to live this fantastic, rich life. But it's not so you just have this big pile of money at the end of the day. It's that you get to live the life that you want along the way. Because you didn't work 30 and 40 years to get to retirement and not get to do the things that you've been waiting to do. So we're solving for that. That's why we're here. And then my second goal is the same goal that all of us have anytime we interact with you. It's to leave you better. That is the goal that I have tonight. So in front of you, you all have one of these two workbooks, the She Handled It or the They Handled It workbook, okay? Now, what I like to say about these workbooks is if you were the type of person in school who loved to take notes, the last page of each of those has some lined paper. You can take some notes there, okay? If you were the kind of person in school who didn't like to take notes, don't. Just set it aside, enjoy your pina colada. I know that looks like, is that milk? Or is that a pina colada?
It's a virgin.
A virgin pina colada, there we go. That's my kind of pina colada. So you'll enjoy your drinks and I'll do the work. So you set it aside. This is going to be a great resource for you that you'll be able to take home and work through. And it also follows along with my book as well. And what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to be talking about the good and the not so good news of women and money, values-based planning, and we'll be talking a little bit about what that means. And then we're going to break down retirement into these three parts and really look at it from a holistic perspective. I'm going to talk a little bit more of what that means for no microclimates when we get to that point. So we're going to have a good time. That much I can promise you. And then on the way out, you'll all be receiving a signed copy of my book. As I said, I put 2 years into this. This was not ghostwritten. This is my heart and soul. These are a lot of the financial mistakes that I've made. This is a lot of my mom's journey in here. And then a lot of the journeys that we've seen of singles and couples throughout my 22-year career working alongside my husband. So you're going to all get a copy of that tonight. All right. So are we ready?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, very good. Well, congratulations, ladies. We now hold the majority wealth in our country. I think that's clapworthy. Woo! And there are so many incredible things going along with women right now. Women are graduating undergraduate and graduate school at a much faster pace than men are. But here's the big one. In the next 20 years, it's expected women are going to inherit 2/3 of the $30 trillion, with a T, that's going to be transferred via inheritance from baby boomers. That means women are going to hold north of 60% of U.S. wealth in the next 20 years. That is remarkable. But that's not the important reason why we're here. It's these. The average age that a woman is widowed is 59. Women live longer. You need more money. A woman will spend on average 15% of her working years caring for children or ailing parents, compared to 1.6% for a man. That means we're putting less into our Social Security and less into our retirement plans. How many of you, by the way, have cared for an ailing parent? Yeah, I'd say that's probably 40% of the room. And you're way more likely to bear that burden than your brother. It's just statistically proven. That means we're increasing the wage gap because we're spending more time out of work, right? And then as my video had said, 80% of men die married, which means 80% of women die single. The chances are you are going to be the last woman standing, left to handle it, and that includes your money. So that's why we're here, to work through those things. So how many of you, by the way, a show of hands, are single? Okay, it's hard to tell sometimes. How many are part of a couple? Married or part of a couple? Okay. How many want to be single? Okay. My husband always hates that joke, but I always do it because it's fun. So let's take a step back for a moment, okay? It's the year 1900. Okay, 122 years ago. We're going to lump men and women in together in the same category. What do you think life expectancy was in the year 1900? 30? 20s, 45? We're lumping everybody in together. 47. Okay? If you were alive, you worked. Retirement did not exist at that point. Okay? So now let's go forward a little bit. It's 1935 and Social Security has come online. Okay, what do you think life expectancy, again, lumping men and women into the same category, what do you think life expectancy was in 1935? 55. 60. We're right in the range. 62. But Social Security didn't turn on until 65. They didn't expect most of you in the room to live well into your 80s. Some of you into your 90s, right? But the kicker is most of you, full retirement age for your Social Security is between 66 and 67. That's not that different from 1935, but they were only living until 62, right? Social Security was not designed to span that type of distance. So retirement and planning for it really is relatively new. And so we have to figure out, how do we bridge this gap along with all the things that we as women face, just for the simple fact that longevity is the biggest risk that we face, right? So we have to look at these pieces. And so we'll get off the bad news, right? And when you think about money, okay, when you have money in your bank accounts or in your retirement accounts, but you have money in your hands, what does having money mean to you? Security. Independence. What else? I always hear freedom, choices, fun, not being a burden on my kids. Those are all intangible. What is so interesting, it's one of the biggest differences that I've seen in the years that I've been speaking to women, is when I have a room full of men and women, men typically give me goals. It doesn't, again, make it bad. It's just different. I'll usually get boat, golf, second home, pay off a home, things like that. Whereas the truth is, and what's so remarkable, is I'll do 30 women's events this year, and I might, out of all those women's events, have 2 women who say this: travel. Yet, that's probably a shocker to most of you, because you're going, I want to travel. Because most of you do. But that's not where you inherently go. You go to those emotional pieces. Am I going to feel safe, secure? Do I know that I'm going to be able to pay my bills and stay in my current home? Those are things that really do matter to women. And so that's why we talk about that. This is why women think differently, right? Because if we have Charlotte, I don't know if you're married, but I'm going to pick on a pretend husband envy, okay? So Charlotte's pretend husband, Mike, okay? Her deep-seated value is financial security. And if pretend husband Mike went out and bought a boat and then 2 jet skis, and then of course you got to get the trailers, and usually another woman will go, yeah, and the matching truck, or something like that. If he had to take out loans and that's threatening her feeling of financial security, it's no wonder the majority reason why marriages end is money. Because we have 2 people who have 2 different ideas of how they want to run their money, and they're not on the same page. That's why we have to identify what are my values surrounding money. Then making decisions becomes a lot easier. And the workbook works you through this process where it's asking you, and my book talks about it too, what are the things that matter most to me? And so you're sitting down and you're saying, okay, these are the things. What does money mean to me? And getting down really to the core of it. Because then when you're faced with different situations of spending money, you can run it through. Does it fit those values or does it not, right? And especially for those of you who are part of a couple, this is really, really important that the 2 of you are doing this individually. That's why we have the They Handled It workbook too. But you do this individually, determine what your values are, and then the 2 of you need to come together and agree on those. Because it's funny, but it's actually very true. A lot of times, financial advisors, us as advisors, act as a money therapist. It's like, I hear what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, but we have to find a way to blend the two. This is really vital to make sure that you're staying married and strong, because I am not up here to prepare you to get divorced. That's certainly not my plan, right? So making sure that we're on the same page so we're making good financial decisions together. Very, very important. All right, so the first part, we got through this pretty quickly, but now this is the big chunk. We're gonna be breaking down retirement into this kind of three-piece approach. So your entire financial world, for most of you in the room, is made up of these components: Social Security, income, taxes, inflation, healthcare, and investments. Pension is in parentheses because not everybody has one, right? But what we often see through planning is we sit down with an individual or a couple and we see what I call microclimates. So it's like, okay, I know what my Social Security is, and I talk to my CPA, and then I have my investments, and then I have my insurance person, and none of them are working collectively. And what often can happen is we can make, I don't want to call it a bad decision, but we can make a lesser decision because we don't see how all the pieces function collectively. And here's what I mean. So sometimes, somebody might come in and Karen says, okay, so, I've got my Social Security, it's $2,500 a month, but I'm going to delay until 70 to get the bigger amount. Because every year after full retirement age, which for most of you in the room, somewhere between 66 and 67, every year after full retirement age, it increases 8% and then it maxes out at 70. Okay, so that's your highest amount that you could have. So Karen might say, well, it's $2,500 at full retirement age, but I'm going to delay until 70 and get $3,000 a month. Well, then the question back is, why? Why are we making that decision? And oftentimes the answer is, well, it's the bigger number. But then the question still is, why? Because what we might find is through conversation, your family, unfortunately, because we've had enough of these conversations over the last 22 years, most people in your family don't live much past 70. I would hate to have you not benefit from what you've paid in for the last 30 and 40 years, right? So that may be something that we find through a little bit of the planning process. Or like what we saw with COVID, 2 million women left the workforce. The predominant reason, childcare. Moms and grandmothers left to go home and be teachers, right? And so what if you were 63 expecting to work until nearly 70 and then lost your job? How are we going to span from 63 to 70 if we're waiting for our Social Security? And I love it when this happens, sometimes things work out and I'm gonna go, you know what, Miriam, you've done such a great job saving for your retirement. Your Social Security, it's kind of an afterthought. It doesn't really make or break the plan, which is awesome. So instead of delaying because you don't need it, how about we take it early and you get that $2,500 every month for the next 5 years and you weren't even expecting it? Could you figure out something to do with $2,500 a month? I know this, Miriam can. You could travel. You could give it away. You could take the grandkids. Why does it have to stay in the government's pocket just because you don't need it? But a lot of times people don't know because they don't see how the whole plan functions together. And pensions often work a lot the same way. How many of you are fortunate enough to have a pension? Ooh, it's actually a pretty good amount of you tonight. Congratulations. Well, as most of us know, they're going the way of the dodo bird, right? So for those of you who have a pension, we've often seen it treated a lot like the Social Security conversation. So I had a couple, I sat down with them, they lived out in the Tri-Cities, and he had retired from Hanford. And he had a $3,500 pension. I was like, ooh, that's a pretty good pension. Considering they live in the Tri-Cities, they were debt-free, so it was about $4,000 of expenses a month. Okay, I know, wouldn't that be nice around here? And so I said, gosh, it's a great pension, $3,500 a month. So what are the survivor benefits on your pension? And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, so what does your wife, who was 5 years younger and a triathlete, what does your wife get if you die? And he couldn't even say it because the answer was nothing. And the question again is, why? Why was that decision made? And they just picked the bigger number. So that would mean upon his death, the pension, $3,500 pension is gone, and the smallest Social Security coming into the household, which was hers at $1,800 a month. So both of those instantaneously gone. So $5,300 of income gone. And they wouldn't have made that decision had they seen how all the pieces function collectively. They would have taken the smallest benefit that would pay out over the course of both of their lives. And so we don't know these things until we can see how it's all functioning together. So for those of us who aren't fortunate enough, which it's at least half of the room, myself included, we're not fortunate enough to have a pension, we now have to become our own pension provider. So all these hands that went up, they're very fortunate in that they have a group of actuaries, very smart people sitting in a room, looking at a lot of data, determining this is how much we're going to pay you out month after month, year after year, for the rest of your unknown life. Now for all of those that don't have a pension, you now have this basket of money in your retirement accounts, your IRAs, your 401ks, your TSPs. You have this money, and now you have to figure out how do you distribute that back to yourself for the rest of your unknown life. That's a really big job. That's a job we do. That's what retirement planning is. It's being able to figure out with great tools and certainly with experience what is reasonable to take the money that you have and how do we pay that out over the course of your life, and also take into consideration that we might need health care down the road, right? So these are the pieces that have to start coming together. And then you have all these other little components that get involved in it. Taxes are a huge one. We've had a full-time CPA on staff for a lot of years. And the reason why, because when you're on fixed income, when you stop working, any dollar you have to pay to the IRS is a dollar that's no longer in your retirement. And so whatever we can do, especially in your 50s and 60s, there's so much great tax planning that occurs during those years. But once you hit 72, most of those options are gone. And 72 is when you hit that time period where you're now having to pay for what are called RMDs, required minimum distributions. How many of you have heard of that term? Oh, good majority of you. Tuesday night, I would say there was about 5 hands I felt went up. So for those of you who don't know what an RMD is, required minimum distribution, here's a little example. So for the course of your working life, you're saving in your company plan at work, okay? You're delaying taxes. And the IRS is just sitting back and going, no, go ahead, keep saving. You don't need to give us anything, no problem. And then the day comes and you turn 72 and they go, okay, all right. So, you know those accounts that you haven't been paying taxes on all those years? Now we're going to require you to pay us a certain amount month after month, year after year, or you can pay it out annually, but yearly, we're going to have you pay us a certain amount whether you want to or not. It is required minimum distribution. And the IRS is brilliant. Okay, it wasn't just out of sheer generosity they let you delay those taxes all those years. Because, let's imagine Karen's on this great cruise. She's having such a good time. She's with her girlfriends, just a blast. She hits 72. She's not thinking about her RMDs, and she fails to make her first RMD. Uh-oh. That's what happens. And the IRS is now going to send her a due bill of 50% of what she was supposed to take out. The largest penalty in all of the tax code. They know what they're doing. So if she was supposed to take out $10,000 that year and failed to do it, she's going to have to send a $5,000 check to the IRS because of it. It's complicated. If you want to go and get the 250 pages of the IRS tax code and read about how to do RMDs properly, you can certainly do that. Or you can hire a retirement planner who can make sure it gets done appropriately and on time. That is one of the things that we have to do for all of our clients that are in that age range every single year. And again, it's the other benefit of having a CPA. We can talk about these things because occasionally we meet people right after they've failed to do it. And we've been able to do some pretty amazing things to help them not pay that penalty, which has been pretty great. So making sure that you're understanding how taxes integrate, because what happens is when you're working, and then all of a sudden you stop, your income drops, right? You don't have wages coming in anymore. So now what happens is we have this beautiful time period where here's where we're used to living, here's the amount of income we have, but we still have to figure out how do I fill that gap? How do I keep the same standard of living? But the beauty is we're in a lower tax bracket now. So in order to fill that gap, we can actually take those funds that are going to have those RMDs for the future that we haven't paid taxes on, we can actually utilize those accounts, pay the taxes, we're at this lower tax bracket anyway, which is great, and get our income from that. So what happens is we pay less in taxes during those years, and it reduces our future tax bill. And so it's brilliant planning, but the key is the word planning. We have to plan for it. Because once you hit 72, the options are pretty much off the table. So it's not the worst thing in the world, trust me. There's many worse problems that we can all think of. But when you meet somebody who's 80 and they're paying more in taxes at 80 than when they did when they were working, they're not happy about it. And there's not a lot that we can do at that point. So good planning in your 50s and 60s is a really important component of the planning process and why you work with somebody who specializes in retirement planning, not just accumulating and saving wealth. So really important. I'm not going to get deep into inflation. I know that's a sore subject right now. But what I will tell you is since 1925, the average rate of inflation has been 3%, okay? So that 3%, so Lori, I'm so sad to tell you, but the $500,000 that you have today, just due to the 3% of inflation, is only going to be worth $200,000 30 years from now. That's not very good, right? And that's just because of inflation at 3%, right? But 30 years from now, the likelihood that Lori's going to need some form of health care is high. 7 out of 10 of us are going to need it. Right? And that's inflating at 5% annually. So our money's only worth $200,000, but then if she has to self-fund some health care, that's really significant. So taking into account inflation is really, really important. And then these other pieces I'm going to talk a little bit more about in future slides as well. So all these components come in together. And so retirement planning, as I said, income is the biggest focal point. Because that is what we have to do. How does somebody stop working, take what they've accumulated, and distribute that back intelligently over the course of your life, right? And really, if you understand this, Social Security should only amount for about 40% of the income you need. So those of you who have a pension, that's great. Maybe that'll fill the 60% gap. But now it's become so expensive to live here, especially in the last 15 years. Even pensions and Social Security we've seen haven't been enough oftentimes to completely fill that income gap. So that's what we have to solve for. Where's the money going to come from? How do we do it in a tax efficient manner, but make sure that it's going to be there over the course of your life? Really, really important, okay? So this slide, you don't really have to see anything except for that big kind of like speed sign looking thing. So this is a piece of software I just love. It's called Riskalyze. And Riskalyze is determining two numbers between 1 and 99, okay? And so the first number, what it's doing is it's taking everything in your financial world outside your home, okay? They all have risk numbers associated with them. Okay, so here, let me give you an example. Risk number of 1, which is dead safe, would be cash, CDs at the bank, fixed annuities, and fixed indexed annuities. None of them have risk. And then you start to go up in bonds and mutual funds and variable annuities and different stocks and REITs and ETFs and all that kind of stuff. And then you and Elon, you're like hanging out up here, okay, at 99. So there's your range, 1 to 99. So what the program's going to do is it's going to look at everything you own in every single type of account that you have, your 401k at work, your Roth, that annuity that you have, or that CD at the bank. All of them have risk numbers. Then it's going to say, okay, with everything in your financial world, this is the risk number associated with it. And then there's the second piece. And that piece is then now taking what is the financial assets of your household, what is the risk, the emotional capacity that you have for risking that money. So it's going to ask all these little questions, little algorithms, going to keep asking, trying to figure out what is really the capacity that you have, that if you were walking in the airport and you saw MSNBC and it's on mute, but it was just red numbers on the ticker at the bottom, that you wouldn't do something foolish, right? What is that capacity for risk for you? So it's going to figure out those two numbers. Where are you living? What is your financial world at? And then what do you feel? Okay? So like we had a gal in June of 2008 that came in. She was actually in this room. I've been doing events here for well more than 15 years. And when she came in and we ran through this, found out she was at a risk number of 75. Okay? That's aggressive. And it's not uncommon that we see that when people are leaving their working years. But the tough thing for her is she was 59, recently widowed, completely unexpected, and hadn't worked for, I want to say about 12 years. She'd cared for her mom for a number of years, okay? And really hadn't been involved in the planning process. So had a lot of concentrated Northwest stock. So when she came in, we had to figure out how to get an income coming in for her, because her husband was 62 and he was still working, had a massive heart attack, totally unexpected. So we had to figure some things out, but she was invested at a 75, okay? But when we tested her, she tested out at a 31. Conservative, not uncommon. And so we're not here to just go, okay, let's just blend the two of those numbers somewhere. No. We need to take that 75 where you're living, and we need to squash that risk down into the place in which you can emotionally handle. And so we started talking kind of through the details of how we would do that. She was thrilled about it, left our office, and then she called me. Hey, Arwen, gosh, thanks a lot for the time and everything, but I talked to my son, and he didn't really know what you guys were doing, sounded a little conservative to him, and he just told me to talk to the old advisor. So she did. She took her son's advice, went back to her former advisor, which, mind you, 73% of women, when they're widowed, leave their financial advisor within the first year. Number one reason, lack of communication. She didn't have a relationship with them. But she took her son's advice, went back, talked to her old advisor, and he said, you know what, it's a good plan. We're going to stay the course. And you know what, if your husband trusted me over all those years, I really hope that you would too. And so she stayed. 3 months later, the worst stock market decline in her living history. She had $800,000 invested in 2008 at a 75. That cost her $350,000 of her security. And it didn't need to happen. And please, if I don't see you after tonight, please hear me on this one thing, okay? at the end, it feels like it's getting towards the end of the longest bull run in stock market history, okay? This is what happens when we have a bull run. Anything that was a growth position in your 401k at work or your IRA or your Roth or whatever it might be, those things in a growth position overperformed, or at least performed. Those things that were supposed to temper on the downside underperformed. And what happens? We get top heavy. And you have a market correction, or you have something as severe and awful as 2008 was, the whole thing topples. So if you haven't rebalanced in the last, I'd say 12 to 18 months, you haven't looked at your accounts, talked to your advisor that you're currently with, or looking at what you have at your company plan, make sure it's currently aligned with what you can handle about risk. It might be time to remove some of the chips off the craps table, right? And realize those gains. So please make sure that you've rebalanced if you haven't done that in a while. So really important, because these things can be worked through. We just have to plan, and we have to understand how everything is functioning together, right? And then understanding how each component affects everything, the greater whole. Just like taxes, fees are a lot the same way. You know, a lot of people know how much they're paying their advisor in advisory fees, but they don't know how much the internal cost is to own some of their investments. That could be mutual funds or ETFs or REITs, things that have an internal cost. They don't have to go on your statement. And so one of the things that we always do for individuals and couples is look at what are you paying internally? Because just like taxes, if you're paying 2% to own something and you don't even see that on your statement, that's 2% that's not staying in your retirement anymore, right? So we have to make sure that we know what the purpose is, and is it still solving for what it was designed for initially, or is it now becoming a little bit expensive? So looking at all those pieces and components together. And then we complete what we call our best life retirement plan. You don't have these on your table. Pavel will make sure that you get those at the end, and I'll put an example. But our best life retirement plan, this is something that we create by the second appointment. So it gives us an idea of where you currently stand financially. I call it a "you are here" plan. That's really where we're first trying to figure out where in the world are you, right? But it takes into account all of those components, the taxes, the market risk, income, healthcare, all of those pieces. But what we're trying to solve for is that red line that we see right at the bottom. And I think you're all pretty smart. You can probably figure out what that means. We ran out of money. And we're trying to solve it for 3 different scenarios. The first one's pretty obvious. Here's the amount of money that I have. This is how much it costs me to live. Do I have enough to get me through my retirement? Okay, so we're trying to avoid the red line, running out of money, or at least be able to push it out as far as humanly possible with great tools, advice, conversations, things that we can do, right? But there's actually 2 other scenarios that we're going to run to see if it redlines. One is, what if you need health care? What if you had to self-fund a couple of years of really expensive health care? My dad passed away last year. He went into an at-home care facility, and it cost $9,000 a month. My mom was writing those checks. That's really expensive, right? And so is that going to cause a red line if we have to use money for care? And then there's one other time we're going to be looking at it. What if we went through the 10 worst years in stock market history, which I'm happy to say we were in business for all of those years, 2000 to 2009, the worst 10 years in stock market history. So what happens with how you're currently invested? Are we going to redline? Or do we have enough, and is it invested in such a way that we're not going to find ourselves in that position? So looking at those components together, very, very important. And then there's something, it seems so simple, yet it's amazing how many people don't have it. Page 2 of our plan has a list. You don't have these on the table, but you'll get to see them. It has a list of everything that you own. Your bank accounts, where your annuities are, those investment accounts, the accounts that maybe are still at work, a list. Because if something were to happen to you unexpectedly, your heirs are going to need to know, where is the money? Where is all the work that you put in for all of those years? And how many of you have had it's a joke, say the luxury. How many of you have had to settle estates for family members? I would say 95% of the time, it's not a positive experience because it's complicated and there's so much time spent trying to figure out where things are, right? So having it contained in one document is really helpful for the people who are going to have to help coming up behind you and settling your estate. So really, really important. All right. So that's the big piece. Okay, now this last part will go pretty quickly. The unknowns. Making sure that we're prepared, that we have an up-to-date will. I'm amazed at how many people will bring in their will, and it'll talk about minor children, and the minor children have minor children. You know what I mean? It's that old. Okay, so making sure we have up-to-date wills. Or like I had a client of ours, she recently got married. And so she came in with her new husband. They're both 85. This is actually pretty cool. They've known each other for 40 years. She was widowed and he was divorced. And so he goes, I've never met with a financial advisor, so your people seem to be doing well by you, so I'm going to meet with your people. So he came in, he met with me, and found out he'd retired from Boeing. And I was like, oh, that's great. When did you retire? And he said 1993. This was about 5 years ago. And I was like, oh, that's great. So where did you roll your VIP, which is the 401k at Boeing? And he goes, oh, it's still at Boeing. I was like, what? You've been retired since 1993 and it's still at Boeing? And I said, why didn't you roll it into an IRA? And he goes, I didn't know I could. I was like, oh. That's a little side note. If you don't work for a company anymore, 99% of the time, it's best to roll that into an IRA because you not only have the whole world of investing open to you, but you have full control over the money. And when it's still at an old company plan, they can make changes to the plan. They can liquidate it into cash if there are appropriate investments when they make those changes, and they don't have to ask your permission, okay? So very important. Make sure that's rolled out. But so I said to him, wow, okay, so it's still at Boeing. And he goes, yeah, and we were trying to do an address change the other day, since they got married and he'd moved. And he goes, yeah, we were trying to do an address change, and I was on the phone for at least a half an hour with them, and I got so frustrated, I hung up. And I said, I get it. We talk to Boeing all the time. I know it can be frustrating. We talk to Boeing so much that my husband wrote a book called Retiring from Boeing. You can read it all the way from the back, right? So if anybody here needs, either is retiring from Boeing or has a friend or somebody that they think could benefit from that book, please ask Pavel for that and he'll make sure that he gives you a copy. But so I said, yeah, we talk to Boeing all the time. I get it. But I'm just curious, who's the beneficiary on your VIP? And he goes, oh, my ex-wife. He'd been divorced for over a decade. His kids were contingent. They wouldn't have got that money if something happened to him. So needless to say, the next day he got the address change done and updated beneficiaries to his children and then made his new bride the contingent. So this is part of the reason why you have a relationship with an advisor, because things come up. It's very unfortunate. Randy met with some clients today. This happened about a year and a half ago for them, but they came in today. It just made me think of them. And they had one child, and he died. He was the only heir. And so, of course, now we have to have have that conversation. What do we do from here? Where's your money going to go once you pass away? And so having somebody who can side with you and have those conversations and make sure it gets done properly, appropriately, and on time, really, really important. The what ifs, making sure that we're planning for that. So inside your workbook, there are multiple pages. I'll just kind of hold it up. There's multiple pages to help get you organized, okay? Some of you are financial ninjas, okay? You can go hit your Quicken button and you're gonna have all this information, okay? But some of us need a little bit more direction. Or maybe not as organized as we'd like to be. So this is gonna help organize you. It's gonna help ask you the questions. Do I have that? Should I have that? I did have that in the past, I'm not sure. Or maybe even like we see with some people, remind you of an old account that you forgot you had in an old employer and it has, $4,000 in it or something like that. So this will help walk you through it. So when you come into our office and we start working through the planning piece, this will make things a lot smoother and simpler. So you'll wanna go through that. And anybody know where that is? Italy, yeah. Specifically? Cinque Terre. Who's been there? Oh, this side of the room, anybody on this side? Who wants to go there? Me? Yes, I do too. Isn't it nice the world's opening up again? Yay, love that. We know you want to pay your bills. That's obvious. But this might not be your dream, but you have something that either requires time or money. And the biggest role that we have is helping you figure out how do we do that in these early years. When you have your best health, you have time, money, your friends are still around, your grandkids still like to spend time with you. How do we do that? How do we stop working, income drops, yet Pavel is trying to help you understand that this is the time period right after we stop working that we need to spend a little bit more. Go do the travel, do the fun things that we want to do, take advantage of it. So you're like, okay, so wait, hang on for a second. So you're saying I stop working, my income drops, but yet I need to spend more money early in my retirement when I don't know how long I'm going to live. And I don't know if I'm going to need it for healthcare in the future. That's the job we solve for. It's being able to help use great tools and communication to be able to show you this is where you are. This is what it would look like if we did those fun things and we bought a new bike. Did you buy a new bike or something? I don't know. Maybe you need a new bike. See, maybe we need to talk about that. But you have these things that you want to be doing that cost money. It could be a pedicure a month or a massage. I don't know. It's different for everybody. Or just be able to volunteer or give more. But being able to look at how does that function within the current plan that I have. And it's actually quite simple to be able to take what you currently have, where you're at in your life financially right now, and then be able to show you different scenarios. If we did this, maybe we do travel for the next 10 years, what would that look like? And then to show you, does it really adversely affect me long term, or does it not, right? And that's the role in which we play, making sure that we can get to that point where you can see that you can do the fun things that you want. Some of us, it takes us a little bit longer. It's a very emotional time to stop working and then to have somebody say, but start spending money. And you're like, this is new for me. So sometimes it might take a couple of years to really figure that out. Some people don't have any problem doing it, right? But that's the conversations of just making sure we're looking at these things and seeing it and being able to understand how it's going to best serve us throughout the course of our life. So really important. All right. So do you mind if I take the last number of minutes and I walk you through what it's like when you come into our office and we work through your best life retirement plan? Is that okay with you? Yes? Okay, very good. So I had a woman, she stopped me at that door. Yes, I do a lot of events here. Okay, so she stopped me at that door. I was taking my microphone off and she was like, oh, Arwen, this event was just so great. I mean, the view and the steak and the wine and all the resources and everything. She said, I just felt so pampered. And I loved that word. I'll never forget when she used that. And she said, but I didn't schedule an appointment. And I said, that's okay. She said, no, let me tell you why. I'm like, okay. She said, I'm 55 years old. Recently divorced. my ex-husband left me with a mountain of debt I didn't know existed. And quite honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to retire, so I don't want to waste your time. And I thanked her for that. I thought that was very polite and kind of her. But then I told her this: my job is to provide you hope. So why don't you come in, let's look at your situation. Chances are it looks better than you think. And it usually does, okay? So she did. She ended up scheduling an initial visit, came in, and she actually had really great components to her plan. She just didn't know it yet. And so we gathered the information, and when she came back in for the second visit, that's the strategy visit. Again, we call that You Are Here. I always call it, it's like you go to the directory at the mall, and you're finding the Sunglass Hut, and you get the accessories, and you see Sunglass Hut, and it's 242, and you find the building. But then you always have to find that star or that circle. It says, you are here. Because there's no benefit for us making recommendations without first knowing what you have. It would be like going to a doctor and, Carrie's like, yeah, I'd like some Percocet. And you're like, okay. I mean, it could lose their license for that. We didn't get her medical records and all the background and understand what other medication she's taking, right? And the same goes for financial planning. We first have to know, how do all these components work together, okay? So looking at that, really important. That's why we call it the You Are Here plan. So we gathered the components, and then she came back in for that second visit. She met with Abe, who's another one of our advisors. And by the time he got to retirement and looking at that piece, you could see tears starting to well up in her eyes. Because she saw she was going to be able to retire at 68 debt-free. And she never believed that she would. And here's a little point I like to make. Please don't compare yourself to your sibling, your coworker. A lot of times you hear things on the media. Everybody's situation is different, okay? I have seen women who have thought, I need $500,000 or I need $1 million to retire, and have worked long past when they needed to. I have seen women successfully retire with $200,000, okay? So please do not compare yourself. Everybody's situation is different, okay? Please, please, please hear me on that. So she got to that second visit, saw that she was going to be able to retire, and and Abe printed off the plan for her, and she's holding it. She's like, oh, this is so great. Oh, this is so great. So how do we start working together? And he said, well, my dear, for this plan to work, you need to keep saving in your company plan at work. She was 55. That's what made her plan work long term. She was 55. She needed to keep saving money at her company plan. And then at 59 and a half, then she was going to be able to do what's called an in-service distribution, which means you can still be working and roll out money from your company plan into an IRA. Most plans allow that, not all. But you can do it without penalty at 59 and a half. And so that was the plan. She just needed to keep saving in order to make this work, saving in her company plan at work. And so she said, so then what do I owe you for this? And he said, nothing, it's yours. You get to take it with you. Because Randy and I, for the last 22 years, could charge a financial plan, a fee to create a plan. Typically, they're between $500 to maybe $1,500 or so. We decided decades ago, we would rather a woman walk out of our office and at least have something in her hand that gives her some direction than to leave our office and not have anything, even if she's not working with us at the time. And so that gal left our office. Well, I guess let me say this. So how do we get compensated? So when we create a plan and then we say, okay, is it Kaylor? Kaylor, we see some of these issues. And she might say, I see them too. How would you help me solve those? And then at that point, we talk about how we engage in a working relationship. We can manage money and charge an advisory fee, or we can utilize tools that come through insurance companies. That could be insurance, long-term care, annuities, and we get compensated via the company, They compensate us not out of your principal balance. There's usually a blend for most people. So it's when we implement a plan when we get compensated. So she left our office that day, and she sent what I like to call the best card I can recall getting in my professional career. It said, to the entire Becker Retirement Group team, thank you. Meeting with you was the most precious gift I've received in my adult life, and my financial trajectory is promising as a result. It's because we gave her hope. This was after the second visit. We hadn't even engaged in a working relationship yet. But it was because we gave her direction, because she had thought she would never be able to retire, right? And there's one thing I can absolutely promise you, and it was on my first slide. We will leave you better. That is the only goal we have as a company, and I believe it to my core. That is why we are here. And so what I want you to do, grab out your Becker Retirement Group, this packet. If you could open that up. The very back page on the right-hand side, very last page says response sheet. I'd like everybody to grab that out. Very last page, back page, right-hand side. Everybody finding that? Perfect. Okay, so you're all brilliant women. I don't have to say, write your name, but I will ask you, will you please write legibly? Appreciate that. Okay, but if you can all please flip that baby onto the back side. What a good group I have. All right, so when we do events like this, we clear our calendars. I was here Tuesday night as well. We clear our calendars for a 2-week time period for all 4 of our advisors. We want to make sure we have time to visit with you and talk about any of those concerns that you have and see how we can help your situation, okay? So we have 2 offices. We have our Bothell office and we have our Bellevue office. Bellevue office is about 1.5 miles away from here, and then Bothell is more like Canyon Park, Country Village type area, which doesn't exist anymore, but you all know what I'm talking about. So we've got those 2 offices, and then what I'm going to ask you to do is write a first, second, and a third choice option of times that work best for you. And then Pavel, and then I think Morgan's also going to be coming back in. They're going to collect those from you, and then they're going to give you the signed copy of my book. She handled it, so can you, okay? So you'll get that. And we will need to collect them from everybody, whether you schedule an initial visit or not. I do need to prove to the IRS that I actually did give you dinner and not just my teenagers and everybody else who wants me to always bring steak home. Okay, so first, second, and the third choice. And if I can just have your attention for these last 4 things, please. And then I'm done, I promise. They're ready to bring in those steaks and chicken and salmon and everything else, okay? So these last 4 things, and I'm done, okay? So first of all, there's something called the rule of reciprocity. So the rule of reciprocity says, I give Sarah something of value, like a great steak, a glass of wine, resources that she gets to take home, and now she's kind of like, what do I owe Arwen? Maybe I should just make an appointment because I kind of feel bad. Please don't schedule an appointment if you're not serious about keeping it, okay? We had this room full on Tuesday night. There are a lot of women who need our help, and we want to make sure that we keep those spots available for them, okay? So that's the first thing. Here's number 2. For those of you who are part of a couple, okay, you might be saying, well, I don't know my spouse's schedule. I don't know if they can come. I don't know if they want to come. I don't know if I want them to come. I've heard it. It's okay. We'll keep forward progress. If they can't come to that first visit, we can learn enough about you. You can learn enough about us to know if going forward for a second visit is going to be beneficial. If that is the case, and you plan together, because a lot of times people get married later in life and they keep their finances separate, that's different. But if you're commingled and plan together, it's absolutely important that they are there for the second visit, the strategy visit, okay? So that's the second thing. Number 3, many of you have a financial advisor. You might have more than one. It's normal, especially when we've been in our working years and we're accumulating money. We're growing and saving and growing and saving. And there are a lot of fantastic advisors that do that work, okay? But when you're heading into retirement and you're in your 60s, 50s and 60s and beyond, and now you're going to retire, or maybe you already are retired. You know, my son who's sitting out there, 25 years old, if he makes a major financial misstep now, or maybe even in the next 2 decades, it's not devastating. He has enough time to make it up. But if you're in your 60s and you're no longer working and you make a mistake, it can be devastating. We get one shot to do this right, okay? So if you've been working with an advisor who's really great at helping you grow and save your wealth, they are an accumulator, okay? We are preservation minded. So we're looking at how is this money gonna last you for the rest of your life? So it would kind of, if you're still going to somebody who's helping you in that growth mode, it'd be like going to a world-class pediatrician at 55, okay? That is not their skill set. Our skill set is one thing, retirement. People who are 5 to 10 years out from retirement are already retired, okay? And then here's my last thing, and I promise I'm done, okay? Whether you know it or not, all of you in this room are part of a bigger mission. It's always seems so weird for me to say this, but Google me. I do more around the country for women in finance than almost anybody. I have a national marketing company that sends mailers. All of you receive them, or you got something on Facebook. That national company that has been in business for a very long time has only 4 advisors in the entire nation who give women's events. And I'm the one who does the most, because most don't see the value in it. That's gonna change. And this is where it starts. First of all, my industry doesn't often think that women really show up to talk about money. Love this, exactly. And then secondly, I often hear from advisors why they won't market to women. They go, I don't know. I think women are kind of flaky, which pisses me off. Because what I know about women, you're not flaky, you're just busy putting everybody else's needs above your own. That is what women inherently do. And so when we collectively continue to show the industry that we care, one, it's just showing up. The other is coming in for your appointment, actually keeping that first appointment. If you need to reschedule, if something comes up, your kid, the grandkids are sick or something like that, we understand, we'll reschedule it. But keeping that first appointment shows the industry how valuable it is to make sure women can gather in a safe space like this and learn. So please, please keep that first appointment for any of you who are making it. But your grandkids, your daughters, the generations coming up behind you, gosh, there's one thing I know about women. You are inherently generous, but you cannot give what you do not have. You need to have the education so you can impart that into the younger generations. That's how we will change this. So please make sure you keep that appointment, but take the resources, use the resources, give the resources away, and let's make a difference, because that is what I am here to do, to change how the industry deals with women. That is why this is being video recorded tonight, to make sure that advisors across the nation know how to properly treat women in this situation, because a lot of them really struggle doing that, so they don't do it at all. So that's why we're here. All right, so that's the last thing I'm going to say. As I said, Pavel and Morgan are going to come around. They're going to collect all of those from you. If you need the Boeing book, make sure you mention that to them, and then you'll get a copy of my book as well. So with that, I want to congratulate all of you on making retirement the best time of your life. Thank you.